I think the reporting process for something so traumatic, like losing a loved one to intimate partner violence, just involves a lot of listening and a lot of understanding the context of where they're coming from and understanding the hurt and the pain and the fear that they may have in their heart of hearts.
I'm Justin Silverman of the New England First Amendment Coalition. There's still time to make your year-end donation to NEFAC and support our many First Amendment and open government resources. Here's just a few programs you'll be supporting. Our monthly 30-minute skills offer quick hit lessons on topics such as web scraping, data visualization, public records, and drone journalism. Our FOI 101 classes show how state public record laws and the Federal Freedom of Information Act can be used to further your research and reporting. And our new multimedia Freedom of Information guide provides a starting point for all your open government questions. All of this and so much more is available as a public service from NEFAC to you. So please help us continue these programs with a donation today at nefac.org. I'm here today with Verónica Del Valle at Hearst, Connecticut Media Group. Verónica, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Verónica, you and your colleagues at Hearst recently published a year-long investigation into domestic violence cases in the state. The investigation, called Lost to Abuse, required a tremendous amount of time and newsroom resources, but it's already resulting in calls from lawmakers to provide more help to victims in Connecticut. Can you start by telling us more about this investigation and what was reported?
So broadly speaking, we tried to tackle domestic abuse or intimate partner violence, both terms are acceptable, from all angles, from the personal, from the political, and from the social. We delved in deep to the families of folks that have been lost to abuse and really embedded ourselves with their stories and their families. But we also talked about the resources that exist in the state, the deficiencies that exist when trying to get domestic violence survivors help, or just the stopgaps in the system that allows some people, like the loved ones of the families we dealt with, to kind of fall through the cracks. We also really deeply tried to kind of understand where the problems lie and how to solve them going forward. But that was an effort led by my colleague, Claire Dignan, who really did some phenomenal work in that regard. And
your work was focused on the experiences of one family, is that right?
I dealt specifically with the Alemán Popoca family. Their beloved sister and mother was unfortunately lost to abuse in the summer of 2020 as she was trying to leave her longtime partner, who is the alleged abuser, who is the alleged murderer. And after 3,000 hours of police investigation, authorities have kind of pieced together the story of what happened. Lisbeth Alemán Popoca, who is the woman at the center of all of this, was trying to leave her longtime partner. She was trying to find a new home for herself and her daughter in the same apartment complex where her sister lived. And her sister was really critical in piecing together the story and sharing so much of her life. And after going on one apartment tour, Lisbeth left, tried to kind of get on with her life, got into a dispute with her longtime partner, and was never seen again. After a set of days and weeks, her body was found behind a dumpster at the Italian restaurant where her longtime partner worked. And I think the big line that will stick with me from this investigation is her sister, Yaneth Alemán Popoca, saying she was trying to get out. I had never seen her more resolved to do anything. And that was a paraphrase, but this story highlighted that the most difficult time for victims of domestic abuse is when they are trying to leave, especially when you're talking about women of color and people in vulnerable situations.
And what were some of the challenges she experienced while trying to get out of this situation? Because going through all of the reporting that you and Claire did, it seems like there are some very common challenges these victims are facing to improve their situation and protect themselves.
So I think one of the really interesting things in this situation is, according to the accused and Lisbeth Alemán Popoca's sister, Yaneth, there were no instances of domestic abuse kind of prior to when things really escalated. There's one situation that we highlighted in our reporting in which, from different sides and in different ways, both the accused and the family kind of point out one instance in where maybe there was some violence, but aside from that, nothing. And I think it points out that things happen behind closed doors that we and other people don't know about. And it's kind of hard to give a woman help or give a person, generally speaking, help if everything is happening in private. And that's what this situation really underscored for me. Like, we only know what we know, and there are things we definitely do not know in terms of intimate partner violence situations.
Got it. And this investigation as a whole, what prompted it? Was there a specific incident that your team began looking into? Did you intend to look at the topic more generally on a state level, or what began the investigation?
So I can only speak to once I joined on in the spring of last year, but I think it might have started with a FOIA request. I believe we got the names of all of the kind of domestic violence victims within one calendar year from one organization. And by the time I hopped on in the spring, it was, hey, we're looking into all of these people. Let's see who we can get to talk to us. And we sure did that. There was a lot of kind of sending cold emails, sending cold Facebook messages, which I do not endorse for anyone. It is the scariest thing in the world, and a lot of the times people don't get it. And we just saw what we could get. I don't even know if we kind of set out to do one thing or the other. We just dug and then came out the other side and said, what can we do with all this information?
So let's talk about that information in these FOI requests, because alongside, the well-reported stories, the personal narratives that you wrote, there's a lot of data and information in this investigation, giving more context and a much clearer picture as to the issue of domestic abuse. What types of records were used in this investigation, and just how crucial were they to telling the stories of these women?
So I can tell you that we had a massive Google Drive folder with a bunch of public records that were kept for all of the stories and for all the cases we were kind of looking into and investigating. I know in my case with the Popoca family and Elizabeth's case, we had a very, very, very long police report that obviously had some information redacted from it, but it was a pretty comprehensive kind of look at the investigation that officials did in trying to arrest Elizabeth's longtime partner after months and months and months of work. And documents like that really laid the bedrock of our investigation. I know in my case, I had hundreds of pages of step by step accounts of what happened and what police found out. And that really informed a lot of our reporting, because first and foremost, it gave us kind of documentation of what happened, and it made us able to say things. You can't say things without evidence, and here we had a big packet of evidence. And also, at least in my reporting, I found that the public records allowed us to know what happened and speak to the family about what happened without necessarily re-traumatizing them, which is something I was very cognizant of in my reporting. I never wanted the family, or Yennefer specifically, because she was our main point of contact, to feel like they were having to rehash the most painful days of their lives when we had documentation and also previous reporting that told us this is what happened, this is when it happened. So I think that the public records were really instrumental in this story, because it helped us fill in the cracks and ensure that we weren't doubling over and doing more work than we had to do.
And if you could, tell us a little bit more about the reporting process, the interviewing process, because as you mentioned, you're speaking to these individuals, either victims or families of victims that have experienced this incredibly painful, traumatic part of their lives, and you're asking them to share all of this with you, a reporter coming into the situation anew. How do you, what is your approach? How do you begin that conversation while at the same time giving these individuals the respect and, dignity they deserve?
So I first started by reading the police report intensively, by highlighting, by pointing out the things that I knew I wanted to touch on. And then I panicked, as any good reporter does. I was like, I don't want to screw this up. I don't want to get in over my head, and I don't want to hurt anyone as I'm doing this. I think going into the reporting process and talking to the family and talking to Yaneth specifically about what was happening and what my questions were and what we were trying to do, I tried to shut up as much as I could. I tried to listen to what she wanted to tell me and then backfill with the information I already had. I think the reporting process for something so traumatic, like losing a loved one to intimate partner violence, just involves a lot of listening and a lot of understanding the context of where they're coming from and understanding the hurt and the pain and the fear that they may have in their heart of hearts. And that I think was really, really important to understand for the first time I kind of jumped into something this serious and large in scope, I think.
So a year of your time and your colleagues' time went into this investigation, just recently published. Several stories involved, a ton of data, just this incredibly comprehensive look at this particular issue. What kind of response have you received so far? I mentioned earlier that there are some lawmakers now, as a result of your stories, calling for more changes to the law and additional protections for victims. Tell us a little bit about the feedback from lawmakers and to others.
So I know that lawmakers have really put a spotlight on kind of doing more for these victims. I know that my colleague Claire, who was really kind of the lead on this investigation, has written about the response from lawmakers, which I think is a really big full circle moment. But I can say that kind of online from other reporters and from just people that live in the community, there's been this incredible kind of glimpse at what we're doing and saying like, oh, this is a problem. And the problem looks different from what I thought it looks like, because there's a lot of kind of domestic violence awareness information out there. There are organizations that dedicate themselves to this type of work full time. And I think particularly in Connecticut, there's an image of what domestic violence looks like. And I think this story for some folks helped disrupt the image of the status quo of domestic violence and provide context and depth into the types of people that are suffering and maybe kind of bring some clarity to what the problem actually is at its core. And I am always humbled when people are like, this is a great investigation, because I'm just like, little old me, little old us, we did something that's good. It's really, really humbling and honoring. And I'm glad that our hard work has translated into a response from people, from normal people and from lawmakers.
Well, one last thing before we wrap up here, a plug for local journalism. Can you make the case for local journalism generally when it comes to reporting on these types of topics within communities? What kind of difference does that reporting make to the communities that you're covering?
I think local journalism is kind of the heart of a community. And I know there are people that disagree with me, and I know there are a million ways you can answer that question. But I think when you get something from the ground level and when you get involved with something from the ground level and kind of embed yourself with an issue in the place that you are, it allows for extended empathy from the people around you. It's one thing when large legacy media organizations, the ones we all know and all revere, come in and report something groundbreaking like that. But it almost feels like a thing apart when large institutions come do it. It feels like this big thing that is removed from the community. When local media organizations are able to do kind of important work like this, it feels like something from the community. And maybe that's just my take on it.
Veronica, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much.